And then one of the other things I'll talk about is luminescence and why that's important and how that can help you with accessibility. You can take palettes and say you need to make an accessible color palette range with specific hues in mind. You can create formulas that will take your current color palettes and then will convert them to those more accessible color palettes easily. And so just being able to understand colors itself, I think, is number one, fun. But then when you start to break it down and see the math and know that not every browser might not be able to use HSL, but every browser can use RGB and Hex. And just, I think that's it's important just across the board, especially if you're doing front end or you're doing design. Understanding the colors and the theories and why they are the way they are is interesting.
Hey, welcome back. In this episode, Tracy Lee and Rob Ocel sit down with Sarah Shook to talk about color theory, covering RGB, HSL, hex color models, and the crucial role of color accessibility in page performance.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Modern Web Podcast. I am so excited to be here today. My name is Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet or on LinkedIn at Tracy S. Lee.
And I'm Rob Ocel, VP of Innovation at This.Labs. You can find me online at RobOcel.
Yay! And we are here today with Sarah. And Sarah, we've known each other on the internet for a while now. Yes, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where can we find you?
Sure. So hi, my name is Sarah Shook. I am the UI UX engineer at Hunter Industries. I am a mom of 3 and I'm married, and I balance work and being a mom simultaneously most days. And you can find me on Twitter at Shook Codes and LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Sarah Shook.
Yay.
Yeah.
We were talking about this a little bit recently, and Tracy, you were just remarking this too. It's like, when you become a parent, you don't realize just how much time, especially with work and especially with remote work now, post-COVID, is kids get sick a lot.
Oh,
way more than you expect. And they're just home all the time. And I know we're getting better at accepting that, but it's
hard.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
We should mention this is coming up because we're at that conference. Mm-hmm. And that conference is really special because it is very family friendly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of kiddos and partners and stuff running around. It's actually been really fun.
Yeah.
People are really good about it. A lot of families came.
Yeah.
Maybe more than I expected, honestly.
It was a lot more families this time. So I attended that in January, and I went by myself, which was amazing because it was my first trip outside of being a mom, that I've traveled on alone.
Oh my gosh.
So it was a lot of fun.
Wow.
But this time I brought them, which has been a lot of fun. They've had so much fun on the water parks, and it's awesome that we're in a place where we can all geek out together and learn new things, but also spend time with our families and have them enjoy what we do as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is what mommy does.
Yeah.
And this is what Uncle Rob does.
Yeah.
And Daddy.
My son was like, Daddy just yells at people on the internet. And I'm like, that is not an accurate description of what's going on. Daddy just has a loud voice, okay?
Devs, this one's for you. I've got 30 seconds to tell you about Wix Studio, the web platform for agencies and enterprises. So here are a few things you can do in 30 seconds or less on Studio. You can integrate, extend, and write custom scripts in a VS Code-based IDE. You can leverage zero setup dev, test, and production environments. You can ship faster with an AI code assistant. And you can work with Wix headless APIs on any tech stack. Time's up, but the list keeps going. Step into Wix Studio and see for yourself.
That's so funny.
So tell us a little bit about what you're presenting at the conference.
I am doing a presentation actually after this podcast, and I will be presenting on color theory and a deep dive into HSL, RGB, and Hex color models and what they are, why they're additive models, and we'll talk about how to convert.
More. Just do your whole pitch.
Do my whole
here.
thing.
Yeah, just what you practice, yeah.
Okay, so an additive color model is where you take light, you're adding colors based on their luminosity, and you're mixing them, and when they're all at their highest intensity, they create the color light, or the color white, right?
Uh-huh.
When you take the light away, you decrease their luminosity, and so you'll come black, but in the middle, you'll have red, green, and blue. And then subtractive color models are where, say you have a piece of paper, and you have markers, and you're drawing, red, and then you color a blue, and you're making it darker, right? So you're taking away the light, so that's subtractive. You're adding colors, but you're still taking away the light. And so I'll be talking about that, and then I'll be talking about why RGB, the colors go from 0 to 255, and then I'll be having people take the RGB colors and translate them into hex codes. I have markers.
Oh my gosh. Wait, hold on. Tell us
Is it a
though. Tell us
challenge?
how that is, because I think everybody would like to know. Wow.
How do you do it?
Yes.
Okay, so you have So let's just do 255. So white, 255, 255, 255. You take the first, so FF, FF, FF. So F represents the number 15 in hexadecimal, and you take the first, so they're pairs, right? So the first two letters in that hex code, unless it's three digits, but we're doing 6 digits. So the first two letters are F and F. So that first digit F, you multiply it by 16. So 16 times 15 is 240. And then the second letter is the second F, and you add that value to the first one. So 240, you multiplied it by 16, and then you add the second one, which is 15, to equal 255. And then you do that for each of the three, and the A and E, A's through F's represents 10 through 15, and so you do that for each of the thing, and you concatenate them, and then that's your hex code.
So a lot of people, they, they're maybe just like, I just either do what the designer says, or I just take the dropper and I pick a color I like. What are you hoping, I guess, that people can understand about this color theory that's gonna, help them be more effective at their jobs?
I love colors. First of all, just personally, colors make me happy. I had hot pink hair at one point. I miss it. It was too much to keep up with, so I don't have it anymore. But just in general, like bright colors, just like help me as a person keep my mood up, okay? So I've always been like that. And then when I got into web development, you start with MySpace, right? If you're a coder, a lot of times, at least in our age group, you edit your MySpace and you did the hex colors that you found, but you have no idea what those mean, right? And then you start getting into web development and hex colors are still there, but then you start learning RGB, because you can do opacity with the color, right? And so like that's a lot, but you don't really know what those patterns are and how they relate to each other unless you really sit down and look at them. And then you come in, my favorite, well, it's not my favorite, but it's the most easy, and it's the most convenient for humans, is HSL. So I found out about that more recently in the past couple of years. And it makes it really easy for humans to easily pick colors on a circle, because it's 0 to 360, all the little hues on it, and then you can easily pick a color. But it's just interesting to learn about what the differences are. Like HSL, there's 33 million possible, or 3,300,000 or something like that possible colors. But then you translate that to RGB, all those colors can be translated. But when you get to RGB, you have over it's like 16,700,000 possible colors that you can make with that. And then the hex is just RGB converted from converted from RGB to hexadecimal. So I think that's really interesting. And then one of the other things I'll talk about is luminescence and why that's important and how that can help you with accessibility. In all, when you get to like, and I'm not going to be able to talk on this because I didn't have time to put it in my presentation probably, unless I just talk, but when you start to understand how to do those to build colors that way, you can take palettes and say you need to make an accessible color palette range with specific like hues in mind. You can create formulas that will take your current color palettes and then will convert them to those more accessible color palettes easily. And so just being able to understand colors itself, I think, is number one, fun. But then when you start to break it down and see the math and know that not every browser might not be able to use HSL, but every browser can use RGB and hex. And just, I think that's it's important just across the board, especially if you're doing front end or you're doing design. Understanding the colors and the theories and why they are the way they are is interesting. And it goes back to like, you actually learn more because it's all based on binary, right? So, so just understanding that, I think it makes you better, a little bit better maybe.
I love that you bring up the accessibility point because my son, he has Dotan color blindness. So basically like he doesn't have anything on the green. And so when you're looking at like accessibility and things like that, I think it sometimes surprises people because I think intuitively, if you've never dealt with any type of like visual disability or impairment, you sort of, when you think of like high contrast ratio, you're just thinking, what can my eyes distinct? And so you think, oh, I want like a white with a different color. And sometimes when you look, that's actually not as much contrast as you think it is. And sometimes you look at two colors that have incredible color contrast, but like to a sighted user, they don't actually look that distinct. They're kind of a little hard to read. And so I think it's good for people to understand what's going on there and what it means to have contrast actually.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like because your eyes actually have 6 to 7 million cones, and each of them are based on different wavelengths. And so yes, when you're colorblind, you might not have like as many cones that see green as well as you should. And so it affects how you perceive light as a person. So understanding that, yes, as you're developing and being able to figure out those different color palettes and maybe being able to convert them from your actual one to one that somebody who needs that color palette is a good thing to have.
Okay, so like there's a website for this, right?
What? Oh,
So we're doing the conversion?
Wouldn't that be? I mean, there's I think, you know, painting a house or anything like that, or even when you're developing websites, you're like, I want this thing, but I need it to be this, and it's hard for a developer or somebody who doesn't understand to just make that slight shift. But is there a website that helps you do this, or you're going to build one tomorrow?
So all of my personal projects have all been color based. So I made a color picker. I've made a Tailwind thing that will blend the colors based on which Tailwind colors you pick and things. And that actually would be a good idea. I do use a lot. There's a web accessibility color checker, so contrast checker. So I definitely use that. That's like on my daily list.
What's it called?
Web accessibility checker.
Oh, amazing.
Contrast checker.
Nice, perfect.
I think it's something like that. I always have to Google it, but if you Google that, you'll find it. And then there's also, but maybe I should build a website.
You should,
because I do know, like I research what different types of color blindness or visual impairments a color palette might be needed, and there are lists of them, but I have not found a website that actually like easily blends those together,
like, hey,
and it is possible.
And or hey, I want to use these colors. What do you think?
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, maybe making other recommendations, or hey, this one is not going to be good for X, Y, and Z reason.
Yeah, they do. But I think it'd be interesting to have just your own regular color palette that does still like meet accessibility, but then be able to convert those color palettes to different ones that are on whatever scale somebody needs for their visual needs.
I love the different styles of color too, because I mean maybe people don't understand. I mean I'm not sure if I fully understand, right, the difference, why there's RGB and why there's this and why there's the other ones. But I can't remember, like, remember in math there was like the idea of like polar coordinates or whatever. You could like translate certain things into a totally different way of thinking, and that helped made some problems easier. And I think it was like the HSL or something like that, that when you're trying to find colors that work together, in RGB it doesn't really make a lot of sense, like how you go from this one to this one. But I think it's like an HSL, or I don't know if it's a luminosity you're toggling, but it's like you just bring it up like, okay, it's like 10% or something, and that creates a nice gradient of colors that really pair really well together.
And I originally was, when I was thinking, I was thinking about actually using HSL as part of the accessibility advice, but then I was reading an article just a couple days ago that says HSL is actually not the best one to use. You should still use RGB, but I do think you can use HSL to find the gradients, and there are specific, like if you are making like a color slider that you need, HSL is perfect for that. If you need, I was attending a talk the other day and it was like you should have colors just kind of fade down as a user gets closer to their goal to kind of gamify things visually. So HSL would be really great for that, because you have that one hue and then you lower the saturation or whatnot, or brighten it till they get to their goal. So definitely good use cases, but RGB is still going to be the go-to, or Hex is still going to be the go-to for what
I love how that works too, because that's like music theory, right?
Yeah.
Like if you do that kind of color thing, that's something that's operating like subconsciously. That person doesn't understand why their brain feels so satisfied to move down the page, but it's just working underneath it all. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think you should definitely create that, because I know for me, when I was getting into web development, I just used the material design color palettes. And that's all I knew, because I couldn't find anything on the web that really did other stuff, if that makes sense. But I would love to have something that just says, Barbie. What are the recommended color palettes for that are accessible? Or like, doing things just based on vibes. Wouldn't it be cool to have, ChatGPT or some other LLM basically say, I want summer vibe, and then it'll do it for you, but then you could do something in the front a little bit after they do that to actually create the color palettes for you.
Yes, I've actually had that idea. I really need to get on the LLM at some point. I have not had time to dig into it.
It's so easy. It's so easy.
Yeah.
It's so easy.
I mean, I know it's just a lot of data, and
it's like literally connecting to an API. It's nothing.
Okay.
It's so easy. You're going to be like, I'm so dumb for waiting for so long. Seriously, because that's how I felt when it came to AI. I was like, you know, I think as developers, we think that it's just this big thing that you don't understand. And so exhaustion always happens to all of us. And you're like, I don't have time to figure out this other thing. However, once you do, you realize that it's literally everything you already know.
Hit the "that was easy" button.
Exactly. And then you're like, I feel so empowered. And that's how I felt when I started getting into AI. So I highly recommend it.
I will. I have been very busy with my new role, and then also this talk has taken up a ton of time. So as soon as I like switch gears and get back and take a break, I will definitely look into it.
So we know another passion of yours, we were just talking about it before we started recording, is Vue. I mean, I guess some people might be surprised to hear there are many more frameworks than just React out there. We love them all. We've used many of them. But tell us a little bit about your experiences with Vue. Are you using it at your job right now?
I am. I'm working with Vue and Nuxt, and then all my personal projects are either Vue and Nuxt or Vue and Astro. So I like to I use Astro. Like my talk is built in Astro and Vue because I have to build an app for the talks that I do for some reason. But it is interactive, so it's a good I have good reasons for this time.
It's hard to say that Astro's going under the radar, but I feel like it kind of is. Like I feel like every time I talk to somebody that's using it, they're fanatical about it. Like, how's your experience when using it?
I like it for the most part. It's very fast, very easy to set up. I don't like the transitions. So like whenever you include transitions, at least on the Vue side, and you use Vue islands in it, it breaks the mounting, it breaks the watchers and things like that. So I don't like that piece of it. But overall, if you need a quick, static page, super easy, and it's really, especially if you're familiar with Vue, it's really easy to understand. It's got a lot of the similarities as far as structure with the front matter. That would be your script setup, and you can still do scripts in it, and then you have your style. So the structure is very similar. The behavior is similar, and then you can use other frameworks within it, which is really awesome. But yeah, Vue is my favorite, I think, default framework to work with. I've worked with React, worked with Next, worked with Gatsby, switched over to Vue begrudgingly for a project. I was not excited to learn it at all, and didn't have a good experience with it the first time because I was on Vue 2, Next 2, and I was like, ugh, this is awful. And then had another project come up that was Vue 3, Next 3, and then that's when I really started enjoying it. And
that's interesting.
Yeah,
because I came over to Vue for the first time from AngularJS. Because that was a really popular path, because Vue 2 at the time, or maybe, I don't know if it's just Vue 1 at the time, but whatever it was, the previous version felt so much like AngularJS. So a lot of people found, that was closer to what they were doing than Angular, and, kind of fell in love with it there. And I know that like the transition to Vue 3, some people loved it. It was challenging for other people, and that kind of community is still dealing with that. But it's good to hear that Vue 3, that's the one that resonated with you.
Yeah, Vue 3 was the one that clicked with me, and Vue 2 is no longer, it's end of life, so.
Correct, yes. Yeah.
Y'all need to switch over there if you haven't yet. But yeah, I enjoy it a lot. It's once you get past the differences between React, like I kind of sometimes miss working with hooks, but but I don't miss working with use effect. And there's little nuances that you really have to understand with Vue, like when to use watch, when to use watch effect. And honestly, sometimes if I'm going too fast, I still have to sit down and be like, hey, okay, or why is the reactivity not working even though this is a computed value? So there's times where you really have to you have to practice it, I feel like, to get really comfortable with it. But once you are comfortable with it, it makes things go a lot faster. It's a lot faster for me to develop something with Vue than it is to develop something with React for now.
Yeah, there's a lot of trade-offs, right? There's certain things that it's good that you've known multiple frameworks because some of that's transferable, but then you sometimes catch yourself. Like I get that a lot. If I've been working on a project that's React and then I work on something else, you're constantly like, this should be re-rendering. And it's like, oh wait, no, totally different reactivity framework in this new one. You gotta kind of stop thinking that that's how that works. So it's like, it's a blessing and a curse, I guess, to know multiple frameworks.
Yeah. One thing I'll say too, though, is for people who are gonna step into multiple frameworks, especially if they've only used one, I think once you understand, even though that there's differences in the way that the frameworks operate, the data that you're gonna be using is still the same. You're still manipulating data. It's just the syntax and some of the actions that are different. But once I had that idea clicked in my head that it's still coming from the same source, no matter, if you're doing the same project with two different frameworks, for example, still coming from the same source, still the same data, you just have to learn how to manipulate it in the way that works with the framework.
How do you, how are you doing deployment? Are you using, I can't remember if it's called Nuxt Labs or something like that. Do you know how your stuff is going into production? Because it's Next has just been pushed so hard because of its association with Vercel. And, Is your team using? Is that with Astros for or AWS or like?
So my current project at my job. So let me take a step back. The previous freelance project that I did before this job that was actually in production was Vercel still. They still use Vercel, and it was Next in View. For this position that I'm in, I'm working with Azure for the but we have not published it. It's still a work in progress. It's a brand new project. We've looked at Vercel. I don't know where we're gonna push it through. I would assume maybe I'm not sure though.
But that's kind of cool that you have options.
Yeah.
You know that the framework's being built in a way that it can be deployed in many different places, just depending on what works for you.
Yeah. So we'll see what works. Probably Azure would be my guess though, just because that's where we're hosting it. We're not using GitHub or anything like that, which has been interesting.
Yeah, speaking of Microsoft, I mean, we talked to a lot of people here. A lot of people doing .NET in the Midwest.
Yes, there are so many people doing .NET. And I think a lot of, I have to say a lot of Azure, whatever you call it as well. I think that's very common though, right? I mean, you come from a .NET background as well.
I did, yeah. It was great meeting so many people that do it, because usually when I talk to people, they're like, oh, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
It's all JavaScript people for life.
Do you have a favorite? AWS, Azure?
No.
No. It's all the same.
My favorite is if I don't have to deal with it.
Yes.
Honestly, I like writing the code. You figure out how to get it so that people can access
Pretty much.
it. Yeah.
Yep. But that's okay.
I mean, I love that about our industry, that you can do that there are so many things to be good at that you don't have to know all of
Ask
them.
me again in a year, because by then I'll have done it. But usually it's been taken care of for me. But I will probably be the one taking care of it this time.
Yeah.
So I'll be learning some stuff along the way.
I think it's hard with technologies. I think with React Server Components, for example, everybody loves to hate it or loves to say, I love it. Actually, do people say I love it? I think I hear the I hate it more so than I hear I love it. But I think a lot
People
of it
always
comes...
madder about things that they don't like than they are the things that they love.
Like
That's true.
We should take that as a lesson. We should all be a little louder about the things we love.
Yes, that is very true, right? But I think that the thing about technologies is people hate it because they don't understand it.
For sure.
And
Yes.
so it's hard to say, hey, I love this, I hate it, until you've really gone deep. But it's hard to go deep when you're struggling on, getting started, or, even getting from that mid to senior level.
Oh yeah, agree. Yeah, and say like for Tailwind, people hate it, and then they use it, and then they're like, oh well, it really is a lot faster once I get good at it,
And it's like, duh.
Yeah, TypeScript was that way too.
Yep. And like, I can't even write Vue without TypeScript, because when I learned it, that's what I learned it with, was TypeScript, and that was actually my first step into TypeScript was with Vue, and you're still defining the props anyways, so it's just easier to use TypeScript.
Yeah, I can't do JavaScript. I can only do TypeScript because that's what I learned in the very beginning. So I don't know anything else.
Yeah, because the Angular world, and I do a lot with Angular.
Oh.
Well, it's one thing that I think the Vue community does not get enough credit for, because a lot of things. There's such a great community as well, but the tooling is so remarkable in that whole community. I mean, that's a testament to Evan and their core teams and the things that they work on. But like the Nuxt toolkit that you have built in, the dev tools, are some of the most impressive things I've ever seen. We had somebody do a presentation on it, and it was just like the whole team's jaws were on the floor. They were just like, I didn't know you could possibly do that with dev tools.
It's pretty cool, yes. And I haven't even dug deep into it. I've used it a bit, and I was like, oh wow, that's really, and it maps everything out, tells you which component is broken. It's really nice. And then you can close it if you need to and reopen it whenever, and it's just there. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
This is why we have JS drops that we do. So JavaScript drops, although should they be called TS drops now? I don't know. But if you go to dropjs.com, you'll see a lot of these kind of really more advanced trainings that we give.
Okay.
And it's about an hour and a half. It's not us, it's people from the community that we invite to kind of give these more advanced trainings. Because there's not a lot of really good content that goes deep, 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 right? You have all this reactionary content that I know Rob loves, and kind of like the surface level hot takey content that we all see out there, but is that helping us learn? I don't know. So that's kind of like the reason why we do Drop.js.
Interesting. I have not heard of that. So nice.
You should come on and do this talk, because it's so interesting what you're doing. Like, I'm really sad that we're going to be missing this talk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We're going to be here podcasting, so.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well,
With Kevin Powell, so it'll be good.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about, where to find you again and how we can get started with all this color journey.
So starting with all the color journey, well, I will actually be posting the site. I will make it I'm going to prettify it and put it onto my portfolio once I've finished with the talk. So I will post that, and then I have a repo called Transform Colors on GitHub under Shook Codes is where you can find me on GitHub. It's not perfect yet, but I'll be fixing that up and I'll publish it to NPM so you can easily import the color utilities to transform from hex to RGB and etc. And then again, you can find me on Twitter at Shook Codes and Sarah Shook on LinkedIn.
Nice. Okay, perfect. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully this inspires you to learn a little bit more about colors. I definitely learned a lot. This is kind of like with kids, they have calculators, so they don't need to know how to do math, or they have the internet, so they don't need calculators now. But really, you're talking about it, right? If you truly understand the fundamentals of how something works, you can actually become a much better developer than you ever thought you would be before.
Thanks, yeah.
All right, see you all next time.
Thank you.